Hi everyone, my name is Nabil J. Topker with HCL Software, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, AI Driven Test Creation, presented by HCL Software and Conformiq. Our speakers today are Chris Hagan, HCL Software's Product Manager for Functional and Performance Testing, and Stefan Schulz, Conformiq's Chief Operating Officer. Feel free to use the chat feature for your questions, and we will try and address them all at the end of today's presentation. Thank you. Chris and Stefan, please take it away.
Thanks, Nabil. Hi, I'm Chris. Stefan, do you want to just get people familiar with your voice?
Hello, everyone. This is Stefan Schulz from Conformiq.
Hey. So I'm going to start off the session. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what the challenges are that organizations have around testing and how we can start to think about leveraging the tools and capabilities in HCL OneTest and the capabilities that Conformiq brings to the table to really start to power up our testing, our test capability. Stefan is going to talk you through the Conformiq capabilities and show a demonstration that will show how we can leverage AI capabilities to really start to get you going really quickly in terms of the transition from manual testing to test automation and that sort of thing. As we go through the session, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the questions box. I think Nabil already mentioned that. Without further ado, let's start talking about typical challenges. So when I talk to customers, we typically hear three factors that are affecting modern enterprises that are trying to scale testing. The ones we hear most often are the ones that you can see on the screen here. Speed. How do I keep up as a tester with the development teams that are operating on typical 2-week sprints and that sort of thing, when I have to do things like running regression test scenarios, as well as building net new tests for all this new stuff that's being delivered every 2 weeks. It's difficult to keep up. You feel like you're running just to stand still at times. How do we manage quality? Now, going fast is brilliant. It's great to be able to go fast, but when we're delivering, are we delivering the standard of product that our customers expect of us? Many customers are going through large-scale transformation projects, and they're trying to understand how they can transition from legacy systems to more modern application delivery patterns. For example, DevOps on the mainframe is a pretty hot topic at the moment. But making changes at this sort of level, deep in the mainframe, in the real guts of the business, that can be complex and it carries an inherent risk. Now, automated testing helps you catch those problems and helps you expose changes and issues quickly and easily. And then finally, cost. How often do we hear, I want you to do it faster, I want you to do it better, but I want you to do it cheaper? Okay, we all want better, we all want faster, but how do we maintain that quality when we're thinking about restricting costs? So as organizations try to extract more and more value from their technology investment, test continues to be an area that often gets squeezed. It's easy for people to say, well, we'll just chop a couple of days of testing time off and we can still deliver, right? I think we've all heard that before. So finding products that enable test teams to deliver as quickly as the business wants at a cost that the business accepts with a high level of quality is crucial. And now there are tools, things like Docker and cloud delivery that help with this. But for testing to really benefit, we need to look at things like DevOps adoption and try and find some clever ways that we can help automate the automation, which is something of a theme of this session. My apologies, there was something going on outside the window there. So let's think further on though. Let's think about what is it that enterprises are struggling with. We've seen those three top line areas, but if a picture tells 1,000 words, then I think this one diagram is a pretty hefty book, right? And when we talk to businesses, there's an acceptance that test automation is something that they need to do and aren't doing enough of. But what's behind that? Now, we've been talking about DevOps for years, and before that we were talking about continuous testing, and before that there were point solutions for automation for many years. In fact, back in 2002 I was working on a project using a tool called Cruise Control, which was a kind of a precursor to Hudson, which was itself a precursor to Jenkins. And we had what these days would be called a delivery pipeline that packaged our application, deployed it to a targeted environment, and ran a set of automated API tests against it. My point being, this stuff isn't new. So why are these figures so low? I hear from customers all the time that automation is something they're trying to adopt, but they just don't have time to fit into their existing schedule. Creating the first batch of automated tests takes time that many projects just don't have. Remember that speed is one of those key challenges customers are facing. And so suddenly we're back to, how do we give these customers a leg up on their automation? How do we get them going? Well, to solve that question, let's first think about what are the products that we have in our toolbox. And so the first of these, HCL OneTest. Okay, part of the theme of today's session, we have OneTest, we have Conformiq, and HCL OneTest is our flagship solution for DevOps testing from the recently launched HCL software division. OneTest itself contains a number of tools that help with building test cases at every stage of your testing journey, whether that's functional testing of UIs and APIs, performance validation of applications, or working with embedded systems in cars and planes. OneTest has a solution for you. There are a couple of components that we're not going to spend too much time talking about today, but I'd just like to take a moment to call out. For example, OneTest Data is a new offering that serves to answer the question of what happens if I've used all my sample data. Imagine you're running a performance test and you need 250,000 rows of data each time you execute it. But once the data is loaded, it's burned. Think about registering new users. They all need to be unique within the system. You can't use the same email ID twice, for example. OneTest Data offers synthetic data fabrication capabilities to enable users to model the type of data that they want and some business rules around how it should look. And then it will create fresh data every time you need it. So I can run that performance test back to back to back without needing to manually manage any of the data it's using. The other tool is service virtualization. Service virtualization enables users to decouple their test environments from cumbersome dependencies. The example I usually give is a car insurance company that we worked with. They had to connect to a national vehicle registry to validate driver details before issuing a car insurance quote. However, doing so cost them money each time they had to do that. Not much, pennies really, but that was restricting their ability to run those scenarios in their performance test environments. You wouldn't want to be running a performance test of 250,000 users in a performance test environment when none of those users were going to turn into real customers. So why incur the cost? So using service virtualization, this customer was able to remove the dependency while maintaining access to the variety of different data types that were being returned for their particular test scenarios. So for example, they could still validate how the system quoted a traveling salesman versus somebody with a family car, for example, different output depending on the type of person that you're quoting for. When I talk about HCL OneTest, I like to describe it as mainframe to mobile, as it really does extend to each end of the spectrum. And I appreciate mobile is only one type of edge device, and it maybe should be mainframe to edge, but that's not quite as snappy. If anyone has any suggestions on how to reword that, feel free to put that in the comments. But whether you're working with a green screen 3270 type application or a modern desktop application delivered in the browser using frameworks like Angular or React, we've got you covered. But it's not just about the user side of the equation, right? It's great being able to drive my ERP application through its mobile interface. But that's not how most of the data in an organization is generated. We also need to think about the APIs and databases that underpin our applications, whether that's mainframe, desktop, or mobile and edge. Being able to address applications built on the extensive technology bases our customers have deployed is crucial to the success of our testers. And HCL OneTest supports, all the different types of technology that typical organizations work with, things like TIBCO, Software AG, IBM, SAP, or any of a host of the middleware solutions that act as the hidden glue to your business, like AMQP. All of which is to say that with HCL OneTest, you're going to be able to realize some incredible benefits to your test cycles, gaining coverage of your whole system from end to end with great technology support and the ability to supplement testing with data and service virtualization. But how do we go to the next step? How can we start to automate the automation? Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Again, this is Stefan Schultz, and I'm the Chief Technical Officer from Conformiq, and I'm going to be helping you to explain how Conformiq has worked together with HCL to create actually a combined solution that can actually address a completely new angle. Chris has been talking about in the beginning about the amount of manual testing still done today, and amount of manual tests still being around and needing to be automated, and this is exactly where we're going to continue with now. So about Conformiq, you have heard about HCL OneTest. On Conformiq side, we have a couple of products. Just want to mention here probably the flagship product that many of you already have heard of, which is Conformiq Creator, which is an automatic test design tool. This allows you to basically go from graphical modeling of requirements to automatic test scripts. But actually today's talk is going to be about a new product line, which is which is called Conformiq Automatic. And this is basically a new tool that uses technology that we have been using over many years already in our Conformiq Creator solution, actually for a point solution, which allows you to just kind of convert manual test cases into automatically executable test scripts, and it's called Conformiq Automatic. So what we see here is both solutions actually feed into HCL OneTest. Again, the focus today will be on Conformiq Automatic, which is focusing on taking existing manual testing assets such as ALM test plans stored in your ALM system, downloading that, processing it within AI-based technology to produce actually test scripts that actually execute with all the stuff that Chris has just been talking about. So let's continue. So why AI, or what does AI help us with? And it's basically trying to address the problem again that Chris has been outlining in the previous slides already. We have a huge amount of manual test assets. Actually, they're still growing in size because many teams are still completely relying in the first phase and progression on manual testing, and then for the regression, they're converting manual tests into automation test scripts manually. And basically what we're trying to do is to introduce some AI technology to help in this transition. And the goal of this is to enable people to get earlier to the DevOps stage that Chris has been talking about, basically that you are able to kind of get manual tests implemented within the same sprint and get them automated, get them into your continuous integration build, and get the whole machine churning. So what you will see in the demo that's upcoming is when we talk about generating manual test scripts for automation, we really mean a lot of kind of stuff that developers would be actually implementing, right? So we're talking about generating classes for the test cases, or keywords, page object classes, even the link to the object repository, as well as even generic files around utility and building your test solution in HCL OneTest is all included. Okay, so how does Conformiq Automatic work? I mean, we have seen this picture now already in a couple of slides, but just to kind of walk you through, the idea is we have a test automation developer, so an HCL OneTest user, who basically is getting some kind of manual test assets from a manual tester, and gets basically the job, hey, can you please, implement the test script for this? So basically what this user will do is he will take these test plans or manual test descriptions, feed them into a tool by importing them, as we will show in a minute. And then basically Conformiq's AI solution will go through each of the test steps, analyze them based on text phrases. And if the mappings fire in the NLP engine, right, then it will produce a matching automation. And if it does not match, it will actually add this line to the end of this rule-based engine. And this basically will mean, like, you need to tell me how to map this in case we have no rules defined for it. So this way we have a solution which is easy to use and which actually the user can configure and fine-tune for their purposes. And this is both in terms of language. So test descriptions have all kinds of different languages or typos if you want, and just coming out with a kind of standard definition of vocabulary may not be enough to convert the tests written by a very specific manual tester. So you have the ability to kind of add new text phrases, modify the test phrases, and at the same time, if you have some kind of new and innovative solutions developed within HCL OneTest, you can also extend our standard definitions with your own kind of methods and automation functions that you want. And then basically, so after this import, it happens fully automatic. You get the generated test scripts and a report as to how successful your mappings have been. And then you can basically go, in the best case, directly to execution. Okay. So about what makes our solution different and how we help HCL OneTest users is that, again, we have a very easy to use non-intrusive AI technology, so there's no kind of cloud installation required. This runs on any laptop. This is not computationally extremely expensive to run. This is basically on an Excel interface, which is easy to use, the NLP mapping. Then, of course, we can customize the script generation per user. You can share also trained data sets or something with other users, so that within a company or within a project, you can actually grow your own vocabulary and benefit from that. And it's completely your own data that you own. It is not something that you kind of leak out of the company. Then, of course, a nice thing is that it normalizes all the test assets automatically, so it does not really depend on what format your data was specified in, what exact Excel format. There's a configuration we can do from our solution as well. We can create customized front ends for various, hard cases where Excel formats are very different from the normal case. And there's also, for example, the same holds for any kind of ALM tool, be that a Micro Focus solution or CA or HCL solution for test management purposes. And then finally, of course, the generation of optimized test scripts is also very interesting. So we're really trying to identify test steps that can be reused. So we do automatic keyword optimization and generation as part of this conversion step, which it will not just produce a code, but it creates reusable code as part of this conversion. Okay, and basically we are ready now, I think, with this brief introduction of Conformiq AutomatIQ. So we want to proceed here now to our demo. And for the demo application, we have actually a fake bank application that we're going to be testing. But you can look at it as any kind of web application you have also internally that you can run this test with. So, but this is a real application, a real fake application that you can actually even type this link in. You can actually play around with it. Don't worry, it's not a real bank. You can transfer to yourself lots of money, but it's not real money. And I will just show you actually here how we are going through a case where I have a bunch of Excel tests, manual test cases defined in Excel format, how then I go into HCL OneTest UI and I create these functional tests, and then I execute them with Google Chrome. Okay, Chris, so I'm ready here to rock and roll. Thank you. So before we go on HCL OneTest, let me just start here. So this is just a kind of an example of a test specification. Now the exact format, of course, does not matter, but it's just kind of trying to illustrate this. So I have some kind of a test format where I have multiple different columns, but the key columns obviously are column E and F, where I have test step descriptions, expected results, and you know, you have some sentences where you have some data involved, you have just simple page clicks, you have some sentences that actually involve lots of data, so this is filling out a form and then clicking a button. And what our solution can do is it can actually isolate the different sentences and create different actions for that. And there's a bunch of tests here, and they will try to also, of course, reuse test steps and create keywords so that certain steps that are repeating are actually, you know, not automated in a separate function, but exactly with the same function. And then we'll execute these test cases. So now this is HCL OneTest UI, just as Chris has been presenting it on the slide. So basically, in order to install this plugin for HCL UI, you're basically going to install new software, and then basically you add this as from an archive which you can download from Conformiq. What you will then find is that this installs into, for example, like this. Oops, it is here Excel manual test, for example, and right. So part of this general information is actually the documentation as to, you know, how our solution can be configured and you know, tuned, and how the learning works, etc. But we have this also available separately in a PDF document. But again, it's there. Then of course this is a licensed component, and just to show you this quickly, once you install it, you get here a licensing pane where you can basically get the information required to get a license. Now I have been installing this, and you know, I have a valid license configured, and basically now only thing I need to do is create a new project, right? So I'll go to new functional test project, and this site is called Parabank. Okay, so what that does, it just creates an empty project. As you can see, there's nothing to expand in this log file. This is standard project creation by HCL, no Conformiq get involved. I get Conformiq involved once I go to this import, right? So now here in the import, you will get, after the installation of the plugin, this new option, which is called Conformiq AutomatIQ. And here you have two choices, either to kind of import a test plan from a Micro Focus ALM tool. Then you would configure a connector that tells the tool how to connect to the tool where to download the test plans from. And what we will focus on here is to go from this Excel variant. Then we click next. Okay, then we need to select the target project in case we have multiple. So we have only one. This is taken care of. Then we basically go here and select the file. This is the file that I've just been demonstrating to you. And then basically the only thing I need to do is, like, I need to point the reader to the row where it finds the header information. And then it will try to figure out, derive the mappings, right? And it will give me a default mapping that I can check. And if I feel this is not correct, then I can change the mappings. Yeah, and this is basically already it, right? From this data, the tool is automatically able to figure out where a test case starts, where it ends, where is the information about the information entered into the system, where to handle expected results. As an option, which we will not go through here this time, there's the ability also to kind of merge recordings that you have done, for example, in other tools such as UFT, and kind of merge that at the time of import, so that actually the create at the same time, you know, identifiers which are usable in HCL OneTest. Yes, and there's also some more details regarding how to identify data, what is the delimiters for that. Anyway, all I do now is I click finish. Now what happens in the background is that this turns on the NLP engine, which will now go through processing of these Excel sheets and produce the information. By default, the tool comes with a training set that comes from Conformiq, right? So Again, in the first training, you will not yet have your own trainings with it, but this I can show you in a moment how this will then look after that. So then you get this high-level overview in terms of how successful you have been in kind of achieving successfully mappings for this file. So in this case, we did rather well. And there's also a conversion report that has been produced. Okay, so now as we see, a bunch of stuff has been produced. So now, for example, you see that there is like this test case file for each test case that is actually in the Excel sheet. So the clean database, if we go back here, there's a clean database test. It has a couple of steps. And these are the steps on the high-level side. So what you can see, it has identified important data that it's supposed to be using, and it's calling keywords which are implemented in the so-called harness class. This harness class is over here. So here, it has generated just some information that uses utilities that also are coming with the tool to kind of execute these keywords. So as you can see, sometimes it's very simple, like open URL is the same as navigating somewhere. And then, for example, when we're filling out a form, you can see that each field is filled out separately. This was this one big registration form filling that out. Yeah, so in addition to that, there's something of a kind of improvised object repository. Basically, for all the pages that are identified in the manual test, we're generating a class here, an interface class, where we can use different types of object identifiers and their value there to kind of connect this for the execution, as you will see in a moment. The thing is, of course, this is information, this object repository information, this is something that only test execution engineers, so people that are working in scripting, are familiar with. And again, the primary target user of this software is somebody who knows how to script really in HCL OneTest, so a test automation engineer. We have many people who are asking and pushing the boundaries and saying we want to put manual testers in front of it, and of course this is nice to have, but I mean, we know this is an ambitious thing because you do need to know the one or the other thing about the test automation. And again, if you are a test automation engineer eager to understand like how is this actually all working, you can look at some of our utils here that we have created in HCL OneTest that we're using in order to automate the thing. Okay, and then of course the report that I've been talking about, this is just a text file which gives in a little bit more detail what exactly has happened. Is there anything that the system has learned, meaning any rules that did not fire? And then arguably the most interesting thing is this Excel file, which is our main kind of way how we are configuring the processing of the text. And here you can, for example, see this comes default with the tool, so you have to do nothing about it. And here you can also see how this can be configured, let's say, for different technologies. So verify text, when I want to do it on the web, should be using this method. I can also Chris was talking about mainframes, desktop, and other technologies. If the same text is rendered with different automation code, I can add an additional rule and then basically render according to technology. So this is for the verification. Here's for the input, where you can see here are phrases that we have identified, which are important, which are the key phrases used when converting text. Okay. So basically, let me get here. So let's now get to this. So as you've seen, we have now created these classes, and the claim to fame here is that we can directly execute them. So basically, what I can do here is now that I can click Clean Database, which will take me here through this test. Okay. I don't need to save those. Okay, then it will minimize hot UI, and soon you will see Chrome popping up. And then it opens our fake web bank and starts trying to initialize the database, where it should be clicking on the admin page. Then it should be clicking on the clean button after that. Yeah, and then it should be verifying some of the text around there, for example, that it really says database clean, because this is what's specified in the manual test. So now here you get the default reporting from HCL OneTest, and you see, yes, we have had a good test run here, but in case anything would ever fail, again, you would see this very nicely here in this overview. And basically here you can see in detail what it has actually done. So we started the application by opening this URL. We verified the text, that it's really on the current page and it is there, clicking the link, verify the text again. So there's a lot of verification ongoing here. So this is not just clicking buttons, this is doing both input and verification, right? And then, I mean, the same thing goes if you want to have some, some longer tests. I mean, this is, for example, where we want to have a user register for an account, so to be able to create an account on the web page. And there's this big form that we have been seeing, and well, the rest here is very similar to the test execution that we have just seen. But the main point here that I want to emphasize is, again, we can here generate fully executable scripts. We have this demo application Excel sheet also available on a website, so anybody who is looking at this webinar can, as a starting point, just get and install this plugin and run this on their own machine and see that it's working from their own machine. So with that, Chris, I'm done with my demo, and you can take back the control and continue.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Let me work out how to make myself presenter again. Okay. So that demonstration there really, I think, highlights this whole thing that we've been talking about of, how do we give people that proverbial leg up in terms of testing? How do we get people going quickly? And so what we were able to do there was look at an estate that had some manual tests. We saw in the spreadsheet there were some pre-existing manual scenarios, quickly convert them into automation scenarios and run them with just a couple of clicks. That was the crux of the demo that Stefan just gave. And so that really allows us to go back to these key challenges that people have got and say, well, how does that impact speed, quality, and cost? So speed, what we're looking at here is being able to take investment in existing manual test cases and turn them into automated tests in a matter of minutes. Okay, that's great. That's a real leg up. Quality, Stefan talked about this idea of being able to prioritize tests and doing keyword optimization and things like that. So we're building great test cases that are doing all of the work that we need them to do, whilst reducing some of the analysis tasks that we have to worry about, that are an area where we're typically very error prone. Okay, users can very often, when they're building some of these things, that's an area where people make mistakes. And so being able to have this in an automated capability helps us remove that risk. And then cost. Cost really is a function of the previous two, the quality and the speed. Being able to build your test automation assets faster and with greater confidence means that you're going to be able to deliver more and do it at a lower cost. But that's not all. We talked about before this idea of DevOps. I mentioned, continuous testing and being able to put these sorts of tools into pipelines. Okay, so a lot of our customers are on this journey to DevOps. A lot of them have already adopted it. We've got a lot of people that are already well on their way. They've been using it for years, but we still encounter a great number of customers who are starting out on that journey or investigating it. And one of the things that DevOps allows us to do when we bring together OneTest and Conformiq AutomatIQ is act as an accelerator to help make that transition really effective for them, and to help them get into test automation in a way that is less disruptive to their business. So how does this fit then into that DevOps story? Well, obviously I'm going to say very well. As part of the HCL software portfolio, we have a DevOps solution called Urban Code, and Urban Code manages the deployment of applications into different environments in a repeatable, simple, and easy to manage fashion. So as part of this process, automated tests can be leveraged to ensure that the deployed application meets certain key criteria defined by the business, and if not, then the deployment can be automatically rolled back. And this simple gating approach acts to free up the test team from worrying about regression execution and lets them focus on the exploratory side of their roles, with testers then able to contribute more automated tests to the regression packs more quickly. And suddenly, automated testing becomes a self-perpetuating task. And before you know it, the business is wondering why it didn't have time for test when all it sees is increasing value over time. So suddenly, automating the automation and going from manual to an automatic process using Conformiq AutomatIQ looks like a no-brainer, and all the other projects in the business are keen to get on board. The business is happy, they get that speed, quality, and cost balance, and testers are happy because they're focusing on ensuring quality in new deliveries and not spending time rerunning legacy tests and that sort of thing. So that's what I wanted to say today. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Stefan and I are going to be online to take questions. Nabil, do we have any questions yet?
We do. We've got a few questions coming in. The first one is, you guys mentioned a lot of different technologies that OneTest can work with. What sort of systems can we test when using the OneTest Conformiq integration?
Yeah, I guess the question goes to me. So the demo that you have just seen was for the UI testing, but I mean, the sky's the limit here because the sky is defined by HCL OneTest, right? So anything that HCL OneTest supports in terms of the execution, and we've heard the breadth and the wealth of the support in HCL OneTest. So all of this we can target, but today, what you have seen was an automation in the web space. But at the end, from Conformiq point of view, from the NLP engine point of view, is just creating a bunch of code for a bunch of code and calling methods that are for some specific interface. So be that for desktop or be that for mobile or other kind of interfaces.
Got it.
I like that. We control the sky at this point.
And can you run the same generated tests against other web browsers, Firefox, Chrome, or Safari?
Well, that's actually also a good question. So yes, again, this is the same as part of the sky. Within the web domain, obviously, browsers play an important role, and of course, right now in my HCL OneTest environment, I have set up Chrome to be my browser for test execution, and obviously HCL OneTest allows any other browser to be also configured for this purpose. And then it's more or less about setting a constant and code to point, to the right browser. If you want, I can show that to you. But it is a configuration thing, right? And so the tests are not generated specifically for a specific browser. It's just how we start the browser in the beginning, which is the trick thing. And also, of course, when running against Chrome, what I forgot to mention, of course, HCL has a plugin for Chrome that you need to install, so that which is basically managing the test execution with HCL OneTest. But this is something for the HCL guys to explain when it comes to the browser. So with the support of HCL, basically you should be able to get any browser to work. That's my feeling.
Great. We've got a question coming in from Thirumeni, who wants to know, do we need to follow a predefined phrase or word in manual test cases in order to convert to automated scripts?
Okay, Chris, I'm sorry. I will just take this one as well.
You go right ahead. I'm fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely not. So the whole trick about this solution that I've been trying to get across, maybe I went through it a little bit too quick, is that these text phrases, yes, by default, we need to start with something, right? So Conformiq has analyzed a lot of manual tests, and I've been, looking at all the kinds of ways how can people say click the button using different words, and we've collected all the different phrases. But the beauty of the solution is that anybody is able to extend that set, adding further phrases or modifying the existing phrases to the language that you use in your project, in your company, or that your manual tester is using, right? So that's the whole trick about the solution. And these spreadsheets that we're using as a training set or as the rule set that's used for the conversion, you can actually share that with your peers. So basically, and what we're working on right now also is to have even an ability that we can easily commit this to version control, so that the kind of knowledge base that is being, that we create with Conformiq AutomatIQ can be easily shared between different projects. You may have seen that in the import. There's also an option to point it towards an external NLP sheet, Excel sheet, which was exactly for this use case, saying like, we have already worked in one project a lot with this type of language. Can you just share your training data, right? So we can use that in our project. This is how it should work. So again, the idea is that we just give a starting point for the training. And the idea here is that when you use this, when you want to deploy this solution, I would advise you to first, see how is this default training set working with a couple of tests from your batch. You should not throw it right away 1,000 tests, but probably start with a couple of tests, seeing like, yeah, the language, is there. And if not, you work with it and you train it, and you see that the conversion tries to, is maximized, and then you move on, and once you have your system trained, then you basically go through and convert all of the tests. But it's based on local knowledge, and this is both a benefit, you can argue. Well, I argue for it just being a benefit, because again, it allows you within a company to retain the knowledge about what you're working with. So far, all the other AI solutions that I've seen are relying on that you go out into the public internet to kind of use data that has been collected more publicly or beyond company boundaries. And if we're working in a kind of offshore delivery center kind of deployment scenario, this is a no-go, right? So the beauty about this thing is that when you deploy this, it's on your machine, it's within your project, within your team, and you control who gets the information. This is a very big important point about this solution. So sorry, I went a little bit probably beyond the question here, but I hope this helped.
Oh, no, absolutely. We've got another question coming in from SRS Vijay, who is asking, what is the licensing model associated with this combined solution of Conformiq and HCL OneTest?
So I'll jump in on this one, Stefan, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just because I'm, haven't said anything for a while. The model follows the same principle as we do for all the HCL products. So we offer a subscription-based model for these capabilities that you can you can buy that month to month, or sign up for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, etc., etc. So we've worked to make this a singular model effectively.
Yeah, let me just add on to it. I mean, you need at this point both a license for HCL OneTest as well as for the Conformiq. So there's actually 2 licenses involved to reproduce this demo. But as Chris has outlined, Conformiq is following exactly the same model in terms of being subscription based and having kind of different time frames available. So yeah, just to add on to that.
Great, thank you. Michael would like to know, how easy is it to take the current RTW, RFT, RPT scripts and use it in this product?
Can you? Well, yeah, you would have to repeat those letters for me.
let me take that one, Stefan.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
So there is a heritage behind the HCL OneTest products, right? We did a deal with IBM many moons ago now that enabled HCL. We effectively act as the development for the existing IBM branch of the product, but we also have the ability to sell our own branded versions of these products. The HCL OneTest products are the HCL branded versions of these products. Whilst the projects are currently compatible, the licensing is completely different. I would expect a customer in the IBM world to stick with the IBM model, and new customers who are looking for HCL and flexible licensing, like monthly and that sort of thing, to be interested in the HCL OneTest branded versions.
Got it. There's a follow-up to that as well. Can you, Faith wants to know, can you optimize bloated automation models that were manually, I think she wanted to say quoted by different testers over time?
I think it's automated.
Automated.
Can you
Yeah,
optimize bloated automation models that were manually automated by different testers over time?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick this one to Stefan in just a moment, but I think what we're really talking about here is basically being able to say how does maintenance work? I think, and one of the things I really like about this approach with Conformiq AutomatIQ is if the page changes, it's really easy for me to just regenerate a test, right? Because I can just rerun it through the importer that's going to build me a new test based on that new version of the template of the page. That's my view on it. I don't think that quite answers that question, but Stefan, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I mean, again, I think maybe the automation model, I'm gonna start to, obviously we have also various models in Conformiq, and I guess this is not pertaining to that, but it's rather more to the object repository. And again, I mean, the solution from the Conformiq point of view, again, is to take manual test assets and actually kind of merge them with these automation models. So, but it would only obviously take these parts of the automation model that is really needed, right? So as you've seen, like in these page objects that I've been saying, or these interface classes, I mean, these are really the objects that are called out from the manual test. So if there's some automation, if there's some data in your object repository / automation model, then these will be lost in the transition, right? But again, there's two things here: the automation model and the kind of logic that uses it. So again, we use the manual test to create the scripts that then leverage some artifacts that we have already available in the automation model. So I would say I would lean out a little bit and say, yes, I think we can help with reducing the set of having like enormous amount of objects which are actually never used by test cases, because we will more or less just take the objects that are actually used in the test cases, and the other ones will not be used in the conversion process.
Got it. So do the manual tests need to be written in a certain format? If not, Pat wants to know if we can tweak the algorithm.
Well, you cannot tweak the algorithm. That is really deep in Conformiq, right? But I mean, what you can do is you can change the training set, right? So this is again the whole point that I tried to make earlier, that when somebody else was asking, like, do I have to adopt a certain language? And the answer is no, you don't have to do that, right? It's more about teaching automatic, how your language works. So that's really the key point, and that holds true again for, well, the format of the tests. I guess yeah, so right now what you've seen is the Excel import. So that's for when the format is Excel. But then again, those of you who have been involved in Excel-based manual test specification, within Excel, there's 100 different ways how you can lay out tests. And as long as just about columns being named funnily, we can handle that, right? And if there's things like test data split off from the from the actual action content in test description part, then this is probably a little bit more work. But we are very flexible here, even for these seemingly impossible Excel formats. And I would just say, contact us and we'll let you know if this is doable, or if there's, again, these solutions can be even customized for people. You see right now a standard solution that, gets you, through most of the formats and Excel formats. So if there's some kind of custom format you have, we're happy to take a look at and let you know if we can, if required, even do that with a custom import solution. And then when we talk beyond Excel, we have different ALM systems, and I've just shown in the demo there is one with Micro Focus, but there's many other tools that have test management systems, be that based on Jira or based on CA or any other kind of vendor. And I mean, the principle is the same. Conformiq AutomatIQ does not really care. It's about creating a front end that can handle it, and it's about demand. It's about people needing it, right? So we have just started with these two import mechanisms, and all whatever is in, even possible within these import formats, as a starting point, and we can do even more.
There's a question. I'm not sure how much time we have left, but there's a question I'd like to answer from Pat Moore. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Saying BDD, or behavior-driven development, is quickly becoming a standard in the automation world. BDD doesn't recommend you write test cases at such a low level, e.g. entering text, click a button, etc., but rather at a high level, given when then style formats, sort of things you might see in Gherkin. How does this translate to your solution that was just presented?
Brilliant question.
I'd like to, if I may, give my part to that. Maybe Stefan can come in as a follow-on, and say, we support BDD in OneTest UI. You can attach cucumber style definitions, your givens, whens, thens, as annotations to the implementation. So what you're seeing created by Conformiq AutomatIQ is effectively the implementation, the thing that's going to go and press the button. At some point, something has to press the button, right? But you can attach the BDD style overlay on top of that, if you wish, with the givens and the whens and that sort of thing on top of that, to say, okay, well, we've got our manual test, in we go, we've got the automation, now we can write BDD style on top of that. Although I would say, and Stefan, you might tell me off for this, but I would say that actually what we see in the Excel sheet that Stefan's got, because it's natural language processing, it's kind of akin to BDD in some respects. It's not the strict language, but because it's using NLP, because it's using that ability to parse all different types, you're not, I'm going to say, restricted to using keywords like given and when, and then you can write much more free form definitions. But Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's a brilliant point. I mean, quite often also I've had this comment from other people saying like, well, even regardless of BDD, like my manual testers, they don't write anything about this. And believe me, I've even seen manual tests where, for example, in an airline booking company, where they just slam down a booking reservation number, and then they put the airport where you leave from, 3 letters, airport where you arrive, and say nothing about this is the departure airport, this is the arrival airport or whatever, and then this is the test step. And it got even that far that in that session where we're working, this was a workshop, and somebody showed up with this test, and there's like this blob of just information in the middle in one of these test steps, and the guy was like, well, it didn't translate that. And it's like, I was asking, okay, well, let's start with what is this that we're looking at? And the guy said, I don't know. So the thing is that in these cases where we have this happens, right, in manual tests, that you have steps in there which just lack information or which assume information, because manual testers usually think like, well, it's terribly obvious. I'm looking at the screen, and when I write your PQR code, it's a PQR code, and you should know about it. So this kind of implied knowledge is there. So, but long story short point, I mean, for me, that's the angle I want to highlight on this BDD question, is like, you should not be writing at the API level. You should be writing on a higher level. But again, we have this even outside of BDD. And I'm going to start to bore some people on this call. It's again about defining your language, right? I mean, yes, right now we've taught the system this is how you click a button, right? But if you tell it, like, when you find a PNR code followed by these you know, the departure airport and arrival airport, you know, then this does not just take one action to implement. But for example, the text phrase mappings, it can also actually require multiple automation actions. So for example, instead of filling each field, right, there could be fill the form, and you know, then you can, where then as the automation specialist, you should know, or you should add that information. You should train the system to say, actually filling out the form means filling out first name, last name, social security number, address, etc. Right? So this mapping may require to train the system even in handling abstraction, but obviously at the end also it's a good question is, how does your target automation framework look like, right? You're working with HCL OneTest, you maybe have been writing scripts already, you already have available functions for certain things, right? So maybe you don't need to fill out actually individual fields, but you have already a method that says, like, you know, fill out the registration form with 10 parameters instead of having, you know, fill out the field, fill out the field, fill out the field. So I'm saying, yes, we can handle this, and this is an important part. So even in this BDD scenario, when you're a bit higher level, but it's clear is this will require training. And as I've said before, I would always recommend to start with a small sample test set and to see how does the current you know, rule base handle that we have defined, and then refine it. And then usually, you know, everything else in manual testing, usually there's a lot of copy and paste, right? So meaning, you know, once a certain language you have trained it on it, then it will replicate across the entire test set. The trick is to get through the first kind of couple of tests, and then you have the training set, and then you go and you convert the rest. So the higher the abstraction level is, the more you need to anticipate to do some training. But yes, currently this default set is based on a language being quite close to the API, but it's still not limited to that only. And again, for more information, you can also, you know, contact us in Conformiq, and you know, we are putting together a whole even training set on Conformiq about how to use this. And you know, this is of course some topic that is a little bit more advanced. But for the starting point, I would just recommend again people to download the sample that I showed today, and just to get a feel for how this conversion works, how you work with it, and then you will see how we can even handle these cases.
Great. Real quick, guys, licensing question. Will this use IBM tokens?
No, this is
because
the
given
HCL
additional
branded
cost to
version.
license this product, why would the USDA deploy this product when they already have so much invested in RW? Yep.
Nabil, those questions I'll reach out to the people asking those questions separately.
Okay.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
It was like a minute before it gave me that.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time on today's webinar. I'd like to thank Stefan and Chris again. Thanks, gentlemen, and thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.